Good morning. That was beautiful. Thank you very much for that. As Mark has already stated, today's theme is Transform Us. We will be discussing the Transfiguration story in Luke, which finishes the season of Epiphany and bridges the Christian journey into Lent. The season of Epiphany is a time that provides a more revealing expression of the divine nature of Jesus Christ. Our main scripture today comes from Luke 28 through 43, which I'm going to take in three parts, starting with Luke 9, 28 through 32. Jesus took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment in Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but then they became fully awake. They saw his glory and the two men standing with him. So in the past, as we've talked about this transfiguration story, we usually talk about Jesus and how he is more fully revealed as the Son of God. However, I want to focus a bit on the disciples themselves today. Just prior to this verse, Jesus had asked the disciples who the crowds thought he was and who they thought he was. I like the way it is written in Matthew 16, 13 through 16. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." At first they answered with the rumors or the popular opinion that they had garnered, but then Jesus asked for their assessment based on their interaction and experience with him. Was Simon Peter the only one that felt that deeper power, that deeper presence? Maybe. I believe at that point the disciples knew that Jesus was extraordinary and even divine. Even though they had been raised with the prophetic words, there was no reference for that experience. There are scriptures where you can see that they are limited by their personal understanding and where they, for lack of a better phrase, put Jesus in a sort of box based on their own judgments and framework. They really had no context to look beyond. We do have that context, however, with the stories we've read in the Bible, but do we even look beyond what we are shown and our own limited understanding and preconceived notions? Do we truly see our own neighbors, much less if we met with Christ? I would like to introduce you to my niece, Melissa. She was born with Down syndrome. She had heart surgery when she was no more than a baby and also had to have surgery on her hands because her fingers were detached and slightly webbed. When I showed someone her picture at one time, I was told, not to be sad because she didn't know what she was missing out on, as if she was someone less than or less fortunate. Melissa has had a wonderful life. She has a family that has surrounded her with love. When she has a birthday party, and I'll tell you, my family lives in Lamoni, Iowa, and so it's a small town and everybody knows them, but everyone comes out to her birthday party. Next slide. So everybody's there. She competes in the Special Olympics. She does bowling, horseback riding, running, shot put. She gets to compete in a beauty pageant where she was crowned Miss Amazing. She also has a wild side. She has gone to concerts and met the bands. And I didn't show the one, but she's like, they're all in the band. She had a special connection with this tattoo artist whose son also, if I believe I got the story right, also has Down syndrome. She loves to cook. She helps her sister with her house. And she has 2 jobs. So exactly what is she missing out on? Next slide. She has a new nephew. She loves animals. That's probably my brother's veterinarian clinic, and we can stay there. The inner beauty of Melissa is that she sees people with a true heart. My brother Stuart, which is Melissa's dad, told me about a time when they were at Guthrie Grove, which is our church campground in Iowa, where I grew up. Melissa was only 5 or 7 years old, and they were in the back of the chapel building. Stuart was working on a project that he was trying to put together for his junior high class, and Melissa was intently coloring, not looking around at anything. At that time, Stuart saw a couple coming up from the parking lot, and he knew that they had recently lost their young son. He was given a nudge to go say hello, and he was like, well, but a lot of people say hello and condolences and that kind of thing, and he really didn't want to bother them or intrude. And while he was thinking about all of that, he saw Melissa's head come up. She looked like she was listening to somebody, and then she immediately looked at the couple coming in, and she got up and ran and went over to greet them. She did not question. She heard what she needed to do, and she responded. My mom told me another story about her and Don, who is my husband. Many of you know that he had dementia. Just as we were moving here, I had started to work, so Don went to our family reunion by himself. And Melissa stayed by him the entire time, just hugging him and hugging him. My mom got the sense that Melissa knew he was hurting, and that if she could just hug him enough, she would be able to make him right. I read somewhere that people with Down syndrome are usually happy. They don't get bogged down with the minutia that we do. They see things as straightforward and don't read into what may happen. They are authentic and genuine. I also have another friend, Ian, and you can go ahead and take that down, who is blind. He happens to be my roommate. I have heard reference to blind people also termed as less fortunate, again, just looking on the outside. But he has a job where he is valued and respected. He is kind and respectful, which has led many people to be his friend. He has interests that he is passionate about. And there are many of us who may not have as much. But just as the disciples didn't really understand the full import of who Jesus was, his full glory and expression, many of us do not see the inner glory and expression of those around us. As I discussed my thoughts for the sermon with others, I was reminded of a movie called Shallow Hal, who liked all the flashy and the beautiful and the expensive things. And then he was gifted with, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but I'll call it True Sight, where, the beautiful girl was truly ugly on the inside, and the geeky, nerdy girl was beautiful, that kind of thing. I would say that the less fortunate are those that cannot see with that true sight, see with God's vision. Those that only see the outer appearance and make judgments as if they know, they are truly the less fortunate as they cut themselves off from what can be. How much more could the disciples have experienced if they had had that deeper connection, if they had that broader understanding? Lord, transform us to see with your eyes, God, not the outer appearance, or with broad brush judgments, or by what others tell us to believe, but truly see the individual talents and treasures of each of our brothers and sisters, the inner spirit that you have shared with us. Our verse goes on, Luke 9:33 through 36. As the men were leaving Jesus, that would be Moses and Elijah, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He didn't know what he was saying, and I think it's kind of funny that my Bible added that line. He was totally clueless. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and told no one at that time what they had seen. I remember when Amy spoke on this transfiguration story, and I probably would have done the same thing. I'm not sure what else to do, and I'm not sure what's happening here, so let me do something. I will build shelters. This will help. But God spoke to them. God gave them the affirmation of who Jesus was. There was no question now and they could know with complete confidence who he was. But they were also told to listen to him, not follow their own ideas and thoughts. They could also not stay in that experience. Guthrie Grove, as I said, was my home campground, and it's literally on the top of a hill surrounded by woods. But just like here, when you guys have had your camp experiences, at the first part of camp, you're getting to know people, you're taking classes, and it's all kind of light. But as the week goes on, relationships deepen, discussions get more meaningful, and it's easier to rest in the Spirit. At Guthrie, there was a trail that goes into the woods and a clearing. There were logs in the clearing that you could sit on, and a sign up in the tree that said, "Be still and know that I am God." I would sit and listen to the wind in the trees, the birds sing, and just be emptied of all the stress and anxiety and worries, and then be filled with peace and connectedness. Who here has had one of those, what I call the mountaintop experiences? It was hard to come back from, but we all had to do that, as did the disciples. That spirit, though, stayed within us, made deeper, not to just cherish and hold on to. It is there to strengthen us, to carry us back into the world. Just as the disciples' knowledge of the true Christ was not to be talked about, but the confidence of that knowledge would carry them and strengthen them. In Exodus 34:29 through 35, Moses also had his mountaintop experience, which is also for us. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. And Mark talked about the dimmer switch, so his switch was all the way bright. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, so Aaron and all the leaders of the community came back to him, and he spoke to them. Afterward, all Israelites came near him, and he gave them all the commands the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. When Moses finished speaking to them, he put a veil over his face, but whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, they saw his face until he went in to speak with the Lord. Lord, transform us so that we may shine that light that we know is you out into the world, that we may live amongst others as your beacon. The last section of our scripture today, Luke 9:37 through 43. The next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met them. A man in the crowd called out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child. A spirit seizes him, and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions so that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely leaves him and is destroying him. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they could not." "O unbelieving and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Bring your son here." Even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him on the ground in convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the evil spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And they were all amazed at the greatness of God. The disciples had just come from a beautiful mountaintop experience and thrown right into being confronted by evil. My Bible study explains, as our spiritual vision improves and allows us to see and understand God better, we will also be able to see and understand evil better. It is not always as obvious as a demon throwing someone to the ground. But why couldn't the disciples drive out the demon? In Mark 6:7, Jesus called the disciples to him, and as they are teaching from village to village, he sends them out 2 by 2 and gives them authority over evil spirits. Did he only give them limited authority, or did they not understand that that authority was theirs? Again, from my study Bible, the disciples had been given the authority, but they had not yet learned how to appropriate the power of God. You can hear the frustration in Jesus' comments. While it was a broader frustration with the unbelieving and unresponsive generation, his disciples were merely a reflection of the attitude. They needed that faith of a mustard seed to call on that power of God. Lord, transform us so that we may have unwavering faith in your design for us, that we may claim your authority to carry out your will not only in our own lives, but in the lives of those that you lead us to touch. In closing, we must not lean on our own understanding. We need to be humble and continually challenge that understanding, seeking the ability to see with God's vision, to have the strength to carry that out into the world, and to have the faith to lean on the authority that God has given us to be his hands and feet.